seen violence on this scale for such a prolonged period. And this is coming just a few hours after the Turkish Prime Minister, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, broke his silence about these demonstrations, calling on them to stop, admitting that perhaps too much tear gas has been used and that tear gas would be investigated, but also saying that he would not allow Taksim Square to be used by quote-unquote marginal groups. He also vowed that the construction project for Gezi Park would go ahead as planned, which is pretty remarkable to hear a head of state chiming in about the demolition of a small park in a city and the construction of what is effectively a shopping mall there. We're starting to feel some of the tear gas from our vantage point here, which of course has been basically a way of life now, these chemical fogs in the air in the heart of Turkey's largest city for 36 straight hours now. Vanilla.
All right, Ivan, please stand by. We're looking at these pictures live as you're speaking to us, and we can see waves of demonstrators in the last minute or so fleeing from the tear gas. And so interesting that Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the Prime Minister, says that he will investigate the perhaps overuse of tear gas yesterday. But here we have a scene where the demonstrators are being ushered in by the riot police to this square, and then tear gas is being used. These protests have spread to other parts of the country. Can I ask you, Ivan, if you're able to speak through the tear gas, do these protests and the nature of them and the speed and the growth of them come as a surprise? Was there any sense of underlying discontent with this Islamist-leaning government before now?
It's important to note that the Turkish government has been democratically elected. It has swept elections for more than a decade, and that opposition parties have really failed to present a significant challenge at the ballot boxes. That has left segments of society that don't feel represented by the government, which has the backing of more than 50% of the population, feeling very much disenfranchised for the better part of a decade now. I think there have been a number of measures within the last month that have really shocked people who are not supporters of the government, but have felt that their way of life, perhaps a secular urban cosmopolitan lifestyle, is under threat. And that is, last 2 weeks, a very strict government ban on the sale and distribution of alcohol. An Armenian minority ethnic Armenian and Christian minority blogger being sentenced to more than 400 days in prison for criticizing Islam on his blog. Steps like that, including the arrests of more journalists, detention of more journalists than any other country in the world. And there's been a lot of criticism from the people that we've been talking to in the streets that the Turkish media hasn't been covering properly these protests over the course of the last 24 hours, because the government really does put a lot of pressure on the mainstream commercial media in this country. So it seems that I was quite surprised that a very small sit-in of a couple dozen demonstrators trying to protect this park and the police crackdown on those peaceful demonstrators and the use of tear gas and water cannons against them seems to have ignited basically a seething discontent among many urban residents of Istanbul, and triggered this explosion of anger. I talked to a 19-year-old today, Fanola, who hitchhiked all the way from the port city of Izmir just to join in to these protests. And that can give you a sense of the frustration that some, especially young Turks, are feeling against their elected government and the prime minister who's been in power for a decade here.
All right, we leave it there. Ivan Watson, thank you for bringing this live report as we look at these pictures from Istanbul.